I'm in my backyard and I'm thinking about content and content creation. And one of the things that I just wrote about for the Mac is this idea that content, the way it's distributed, has changed in my lifetime. So here I am, I'm thinking about things, and it's like, I want to call someone. And my instinct as a 47-year-old is to just pick up the phone and make a phone call. But the reality is that it appears that the younger generation, my children, for example, you don't just call them, you text them. And when you text them, you probably won't even get on the phone with them. You probably will end up FaceTiming. And when you end up FaceTiming, it's more intimate. One of the things I've seen with the kids is that you're on the phone, you're just hanging out with them. They may be playing a game, they may be talking to someone else, they may be doing something else, but you are just present with them. And I feel that that's a meaningful thing. So I'm just doing some stream of consciousness here. So I'm thinking about my kids. I rarely call them. Actually, sorry, I do still call them, but usually they don't pick up. And when I have a business question that I want to ask, I have to think to myself, is it best to email? Is it best to text? Is it best to FaceTime? Is it best to schedule a meeting? Sometimes I want to actually engage with someone, and I actually really enjoy the idea of calling someone. But when I call someone, they usually don't pick up. And that means that they could be in a meeting. That means they could be not ready to talk to me. Maybe they're in a situation where they can't talk. So we have a lot more flexibility in this era. So that's what got me thinking about the creation of this guide that I will be publishing on Substack that hopefully you'll read. The guide, I look at all the different ways of communicating, and I think about what I've experienced, what the younger generation has experienced, and I've also thought about what the world is experiencing. I don't claim to be the person that knows it all. By publishing this, I actually hope that you, as the person reading this article, will look at it and say to me, I agree with that. I don't agree with that. This is my experience in this. This is my experience in that. And I hope that that will result in a dialogue that can help us to clarify for people what is acceptable, what is not acceptable in this day and age. But the other thing that I wanted to really think about is me getting a little bit more or a lot more sophisticated with the way I broadcast. Of late, I've been watching a lot of content on YouTube. Yeah, that's right. I just put my leg up and I'm wearing shorts. And I watch the content on YouTube. I'm watching all these creators. I'm watching all this political stuff. And I'm realizing that these political people earn their credibility not through the idea that they have the most polished backdrops or whatever it may be. A lot of the times these people are actually in their basement or in their backyard. Like, I just thought to myself this today. I mean, and granted, it's like 100 degrees here in New York, in Yonkers, but like, why can't I just go outside and create this content and see what happens, right? So then I realized, okay, I can face it this way or I can face it this way. And I'm facing here. The other option was to be facing the bushes. And I actually think that this background is pretty freaking cool. And maybe I'll start using it more. So I had this instinct. It's like, okay, wrote the article. I know that the people that are most successful on Substack don't just have Substack. They're using YouTube in a way that is a lot more different, a lot more free. I know that people are using gaming, for example, in their content creation. So like people just play games and they're just hanging out and natural things happen. And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, so then why am I so freaking polished? Why do I need such a big editorial calendar? I don't. So I had the idea to write the article. I'm going to take a look at some of my thoughts from the article, and I'll be talking to you about them. Now, this is where it gets a little difficult for me, because I'm like Mr. I'm not the best at navigating these tabs, and like I'm sitting here and I'm like trying to figure out, okay, I have this tab, I'm going to move that down here. Okay, here I am. And then I have this idea that that I came up with from my article. The article suggests that the chat is the bloodstream, meetings are the lungs, and voice is the heart. Chat is the bloodstream, so things are constantly flowing and it's just happening. Meetings are the lungs, so it's more coordinated, it's more planned, it comes together. And then after you've started to think about what you're going to say and you put it out there, you do it with your voice, that's the heart. How do you feel about that as a sort of metaphor for communications? I'm going to dive a little bit deeper now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other principles here. And eventually, when I do more of this, I'm going to start to show visuals, more visuals for what I'm talking about. So we've covered this idea that it's called the silent anxiety of the unannounced call. And I wonder, do you feel that? How do you feel about an unannounced call? Does it bother you? Do you appreciate it? If you appreciate it, who do you appreciate it from? And who do you not appreciate from? When you call your parents, if you're, say, in your 40s, what do you use? Do you use your FaceTime, or do you use your regular phone? Do you even have you changed your consumption? Do you even use a regular phone number these days when you have FaceTime? When I was in Barbados last week or the other week, I only used internet to make calls when I was on Wi-Fi, which I thought was pretty different and actually quite healthy. I didn't need to utilize the phone and have it on at all times. And quite frankly, who do I get phone calls from in any given week? It's just from like 3 or 4 people. Okay, so that's the silent anxiety of the unannounced call. So in the next part of the article, I talk about why calling feels like a violation now. So now it's like kicking down the door to someone's mental living room with a megaphone saying, "Got a sec." I think that's actually quite presumptuous to say, "Got a sec." It's all on your terms. Well, what about them? People have agency. People have ideas. And there's a person that I have researched a lot. He wrote a book called Stolen Focus. His name is Johan Hari. And he says that our ability to do meaningful work is being eroded by constant interruptions. A surprise call doesn't just break your day, it steals your mental momentum. That's happened to me. It's like if I'm doing a lot of writing these days and someone calls me and they're like, "Hey, I need to talk to you." Well, I might not be ready to talk to you. That's why the idea of sending a message. So we've shifted from this real-time communications to we've shifted from real-time communication to right-time communication. Right-time communication is when you deliver the right message at the right time for the right reasons. We've shifted from availability to autonomy, and we've also shifted from interruption to intentionality. So you have to be intentional with your message, and it's not rudeness; it's actually self-defense to respect people and their boundaries and what they're delivering. So now let's move into this idea of FaceTime versus a phone call. It's not just the tech. I would say, based on my research, that FaceTime is intimacy. It's for people you'd like to hug. And I would say, based on my research and my personal experience, that phone calls are utility. That's for transactional stuff, clarifications, and emotional nuance. I would also say in this case that phone calls, for certain generations are easier to deal with. So let me just be real. Like, I am not a girl, and I really don't care about whether my head is shaved right or whatever it may be. But there are a lot of people, like what my grandmother used to say. She's like, I haven't put my face on yet. And the idea that you would call a person and they might be self-conscious about how they look, they might not be wearing the right clothing, they might be in their home and it might be a mess. This idea that you call them on FaceTime could cause a lot of mental disruption. And if you want your conversation to be fluid, you don't want people to be on edge, right? So if you wouldn't hug someone in real life, don't FaceTime them without warning. That's my advice to you. And this isn't about being fragile, it's about managing the emotional bandwidth that different modes of communication require. So now let's move to part 3, which is the chat versus the call versus the conference. Okay, so this is my strategic lens. So I believe that chat is good for speed, async, updates, and low context info. I always hate it when someone sends me a chat that looks like an email. It just doesn't make sense to me. I once sent my daughter a chat message and she just found it to be too long. And she told me that. And she actually questioned, she's like, "Daddy, did you use AI?" And I told her that the AI that I used was to organize thoughts, and it's to help me to streamline my communication. It was actually a message telling her how much I loved her. And I believe that the AI didn't take away from it, but maybe that takes away from some people. And I'm actually very well aware of that. And I'm thinking about that as I use it in my writing. To be honest, my writing these days uses AI, but I also disclose when I use AI, how I use AI, why I use AI. And I believe that that should be a helpful way to communicate for everyone going forward, because we all use AI, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we all are using it in a transparent way. We don't all use AI, but I would venture to say that it is much more efficient and practical to help streamline your writing and even your thinking with AI, to do research, to ask questions that you may not have been able to figure out if you didn't use AI. I've had many experiences over the last few weeks where some ideas that I've had became much more streamlined because I used AI. So, for example, I am working on a new business idea, and I've had 3 or 4 conversations about the new business idea, and I've recorded them using transcription software that I often use. I use Fathom.ai, and what I love about Fathom is you can, during the meeting, you can click buttons and you can see how those buttons. You can say this is an important message, this is a insight, etc. And then you can go back to that and you could come to some conclusions. But the thing that I found to be really valuable was I took conversation 1, conversation 2, conversation 3, and conversation 4, and I ran it through Google's Notebook LM. And what resulted was one of those creepy conversations where you have the 2 podcast hosts that are talking about the idea, and the nuance and the level of detail that came out of that conversation is truly an executive summary that I will use going forward. And I find it to be beautiful. We'll talk about privacy a little bit later, because when you put private ideas, whether you're talking about therapy or something, like I constantly talk to AI about what's happening in my life. Maybe I'm wrong about doing that, but it comes back with some really good advice for me sometimes. And I'm also aware of all the drawbacks of putting all my information out there. But when you put information into these tools, you have to be aware of who owns it. So I'll have a whole section about that in a bit. So let's get back to that. So chat is, it fails when tone and nuance matter. And the risk is you have these infinite threads and you have organizational amnesia. So what I suggest is you use chat when you need a quick update, when you're not sure if someone is free, and if it's low stakes and low emotion. You should not use chat for decisions, debates, and conflict, or anything involving feedback or tone. I've had many situations where I've used chat, and people have misinterpreted what I've said, and I've misinterpreted what people said as well. And I guess emojis help with that, but be careful with that. So now let's go on to phone and voice. This is good for resolving ambiguity, emotional nuance, trust building, but it fails when one party isn't ready or is multitasking. It also has a risk. If you don't document, things disappear into the memory void. That's what I was talking about earlier. When I use a transcription service for very important critical meetings that are building on momentum, I take those transcripts and I use them to come up with narratives. You can't do that when you're chatting, and it's also shady if you were to record that and not let someone else know what you're doing. So what do you use voice for? Where there's no tension to resolve, when something sensitive needs clarity, and when you need real-time alignment. You should avoid chat if it could be a 3-message thread, or if you're prone to calling it just to be productive. So now let's get into the video and the FaceTime or the Zoom. This is good for collaboration, creative co-thinking, and team alignment, but it fails when there's no agenda or no attention. Have you ever seen those things? And once I get better at editing, I'll add these things in. There have been many chats that people have had within these FaceTimes or Zooms where there are like 10 notebook, 10 of those auto transcription services and no one else there. That's freaking dystopian and weird. And another risk that you have when you're using these communications methods is the meeting theater, or what we'll call performative productivity. So what we suggest, or what I suggest, is you should use video when visual cues matter, when you're demoing something, and if it's scheduled with mutual consent. We use video and we go live on our Friday afternoon Mac meetings. And the reason why is because we want to see people's expressions and face. And we also want to show content. So if we're showing an ad, or we're showing a PowerPoint, or if we have ideas that help us to organize our thoughts and conversations, that becomes an enhancement to the message we're delivering. You want to avoid random surprise video calls to people who you don't emotionally owe it to. So let's talk about how this changes strategic team communications. This is more than etiquette, it's infrastructure. Think of the tools you use. So as I said before, chat is the bloodstream. It's fast, reactive, and informal. Voice is the heart. You have tone, emotion, and nuance. And meetings are the lungs. That's the alignment and the shared oxygen. If you overdo one, your system collapses. So you have too much chat, you're going to have burnout and confusion. If you have too much asynchronous conversations, you're going to have isolation and silos. And then you have too many meetings, you're going to have attention bankruptcy. So with strategic communications, that means asking what preserves energy, which is a totally different dynamic than what happened in the earlier days. What builds trust, and what gets the job done without draining our soul. You won't drain my soul. All right. I think Beyonce said, you won't break my soul. So whatever it may be, we don't want to drain people's soul. Now, with regards to privacy and the price of communication, which is another dynamic of this narrative that I'm talking about here, you just have to be careful, because you can't pretend that every ping lives in a vacuum. Most of our communications is stored, it's mined, and it's monetized. And if the product is free, you're the product. And that's according to every privacy expert ever. So think about WhatsApp. It's encrypted, sure, but guess who owns it? It's Meta. And metadata is still harvested. Meta harvests metadata. Slack, that's owned by Salesforce. There's more privacy there, but if you're on your work Slack, it could be harvested by your admin. And the admin can look up things that are said, et cetera, depending on if there's trust in your company. Now, Zoom, people talk about Zoom as the savior, but Zoom isn't exactly the savior. I do remember when the news came out, when they changed their privacy policies, and they said that we use our AI to train things. So they have also shared data with Facebook. So people don't read privacy policies, but when they do, they might find out that if you use the wrong platform at the wrong time, you might be pissing off someone that you don't want to piss off, but B, you might be revealing secrets that you don't want to reveal. Most people think it doesn't affect them, but increasingly we're seeing a new generation of people that are much more aware of this. My son is much more aware of the idea that spying is a possibility, and he's very, very careful about that. And, I switched from Zoom to Google Meet. The story of switching from Zoom to Google Meet is simple. I didn't want to pay $16 a month for Zoom. I already paid Google for Gmail and the Google Suite. So I figured, okay, after the pandemic, the Google Suite got a lot better than it was before. And a lot of the problems that I had with Google from a performance perspective were not good. They were addressed. But the truth is that that's your ad targeting machine. So if you use this kind of stuff and then you start to see these ads and they talk about things that you're talking about on the conference call, you'll know exactly where it came from. You're giving it to them. So if you're talking about layoffs or personal trauma, I would stay away from that. It would be like whispering secrets into a bugged room with the lights on. So the tools that actually respect you. Now we have Signal, and Signal is end-to-end encrypted. It's open source and it's metadata free. And then you have the Proton Mail and Proton Drive. That's basically Gmail, but with integrity, as they say. There's another one that I don't really, I haven't come across very much in my career, but it's called Thema, and it's paid, and it's a phone number free messaging. And then there's one called Jitsi and Whereby, two of them actually, and those are for video calling without data creep. So that would be the opposite of WhatsApp. And these tools are not just for paranoid people. I don't think of myself as a paranoid person. They're for people who don't want their relationships to double as revenue streams for surveillance capitalism. But I want to make it very clear that Signal is not your secret bunker, and you need to calm down. So let's inject a little comedy into this here. So Signal is secure. It's funded by grants. It blocks your ex. It keeps your therapist's emojis safe. But please do not use Signal like you're Jason Bourne organizing a micro rebellion from your break room. You should use Signal for coordinating a protest, for giving honest feedback, for setting real boundaries. But you don't want to use it for phase 3 of Operation Velvet Anvil. Bring the decoys and lasagna. You need to use Signal properly. And I'm raising this because in the news media, it's very clear that Signal was used by people for inappropriate communications. So you have to remember that encryption is not impunity. You have to remember that privacy is not smart decision making. And you have to remember that being on Signal is not being in a spy thriller. You have to use it with integrity. And if you're really planning something sketchy, then maybe you should log off entirely. Like the idea that it's free and it's private doesn't mean that it's an invitation for you to do something shady. And I have to sneeze. Excuse me. I didn't edit that out because I'm live. People sneeze. I'm trying this and I feel a little comfortable. I feel like I'm flowing with information, and I'd love your feedback on this. So the strategic summary here is that communication is a leadership choice. Every time you cold call someone, you are stealing their attention. That's probably why you don't get the cold calls. Every time you send a text without permission, just think about how illegal it is to do that in other countries, like in Europe. Every time you default to Zoom, you sacrifice your contacts for surveillance. Every time you use Signal thoughtfully, you do protect your autonomy. So this isn't just etiquette, it is ethics. So the closing thought is I am still learning to navigate this landscape too, and I genuinely love to hear your take. So tell me, what generation are you? What's changed for you? And what do you wish people understood about your boundaries, tone, or timing? If you disagree, that's perfect. The world needs less certainty and more curiosity right now. So share your version. Let's build a new etiquette together. I'll be right with you. Before we accidentally mute the people we care about most.